as the kind of market starts to settle itself, where you're going to have 4 or 5, maybe fewer big companies that own the models, the differentiators across those models are going to be what data sets they have in their models.
Welcome to MRII's Insights and Innovators podcast, where we talk to top market research professionals to get their inside stories about innovative and enduring best practices. Now, here's your host for today's episode.
Welcome to today's episode of Insights and Innovators, the case against paying respondents with John Dick of CivicScience. I'm your host and former MRI president, John Last. One of the biggest problems with survey and market research is the way that we've been doing it for decades. This may or may not be true, but today's guest, John Dick, founder and CEO of CivicScience, believes that paying respondents introduces bias, and he also subscribes to the long-held belief that longer surveys degrade the quality of response. His solution? Microsurveys with just 5 questions delivered at massive scale, over 1 million responses a day, and without a single financial incentive. The result is continuously evolving syndicated data that aims to be faster, broader, and more representative than traditional panels, especially among populations that don't usually take surveys. In this episode, we'll explore why John believes that the conventional model is broken, how CivicScience validates its approach, the kinds of insights that this model enables, and how new technologies like AI may play a role going forward. John, it's great to have you on Insights and Innovators. Let's dive in.
Great to be here, John. Thanks. Love the work you all do.
Let's start by really kind of thinking about the fact that, for years, researchers have relied on incentives to recruit respondents. We live with this reality in our firm every day. And while there's debate about the best length for a survey, they generally last about 8 to 10 minutes, if not longer. But you've gone the complete opposite direction. Why do you believe that shorter and unpaid surveys actually deliver better data? Let's start with the surveys without paying respondents. How do you achieve this? And why do you think it's better?
How do we achieve it? I'll get there in a second, but there's really 2 underlying observations here that I think are fairly logical and intuitive. The first is that people who have the time and the inclination in their day to spend 8 to 10 or more minutes answering surveys are naturally different from the people who don't have the time and the inclination to do that, whether they're being compensated or not, right? I don't think that intellectually is offensive to anyone to make that claim. The second claim is that people have demonstrated lots of different ways a willingness and even an eagerness to share their opinions about things, right? Absent any extrinsic incentive, whether it's comments they're posting on social media or elsewhere, there is a natural predilection of most people to want to be heard, to want to have their opinions registered. And so I don't think either of those 2 things are intellectually, again, offensive. And they're really just the 2 underlying premises of the approach that we took to this, right? And so companies based in Pittsburgh started out of an incubator at Carnegie Mellon based on some research we did on these subjects. And we started to think about, okay, what are ways that we could engage people in question and answer exercises without that kind of that burden of both the financial burden of the incentive and then the methodological burden of that extrinsic motive for respondents. And the answer was right in front of us. We looked at our hometown Pittsburgh Post-Gazette website had a poll of the day on its homepage. Thousands of people answered it every day. Or at the time when we started the company, it was really popular were these quizzes on BuzzFeed. What kind of Simpsons character are you? What kind of wine are you? It demonstrated that
addicted to those.
People could be motivated to do these things. And so we started to, we did a lot of research and testing on why, what were the underlying reasons people did it? And really the number one reason was we're kind of all narcissists and voyeurists to some extent. And we like to, we'll share our opinion to see how we fit among other people or to see what the rest of the world thinks. Secondly, there are, certainly a lot of people out there that feel like, whether they understand the seriousness or methodology of the survey they're participating in, that maybe somebody's listening, maybe somebody will hear their opinion and they'll weigh in. So we thought about how do we optimize for that experience for people? How do we get not only more people to want to engage in those types of poll and quiz experiences, but also really kind of improve that intrinsic that intrinsic payoff for them. And so we did that. So we partnered with hundreds of media properties, newspaper sites, mobile games, lots of lifestyle publishers, news publishers, and the like, who embed our polling widgets, as we call them, inside their content. And we use what we call an engagement question, which is generally germane to the topic of, say, an article someone is reading, to bring them into the survey. And then we pose 4 additional research questions to them. They get to see the results at the end. We have a couple different cool ways we show them how they compare to other people, or how people like them answered other questions they hadn't been asked, and so on. And it really works. And it's allowed us to really scale the level of data we collect.
Yeah, it sounds like a great way to kind of create a conversation as much as a research study, and yet, capping it to 5 questions. Gosh, I'm admiring that. Thinking about survey creep and how big of an issue that's been throughout my career. What happens if a survey goes longer?
Well, we see degradation in response, and one of our little sayings here is that every time you add a question to a survey, you increase the bias in the people who will answer it, and even between, say, 1 and 2 questions to 5, we see a difference. And we've tested 6, we've tested 8, we've tested all different. And 5 is sort of turns out to be kind of the perfect number, where we do see a little bit of linear degradation in response rate, and then and with that sort of a mild changes in the composition of the types of people who make it to 5 questions. But first, that linear break becomes more severe at 6 for some reason. Again, this is now. We've done over 6 billion of these to be able to test that now, to know that 5 is kind of the magic number. We get the maximum amount of information gain from the session without creating that degradation. Now, one thing I will add is at the end of those 5-question polls or surveys, the respondent is given the opportunity to click to answer more. Right. And roughly about 15 to 20% of people often do. But we've also now learned that those people who will maybe spend upwards of 8 to 10 minutes answering questions in a given session, they look very different from the people who won't. We call them super responders. And when we do our analytics and manage our database, we have to account for that sort of over indexing of that type of respondent, because they are psychographically different from say, that 5-question answering segment.
Which is interesting when you talk about the variation in respondent type. You've achieved this impressive scale of over 1 million people responding daily. What gives you the confidence in the representativeness of the data, and how are you reaching some kinds of folks that other firms might miss?
A few things. One is we're gathering self-reported demographic information from our respondents. It's part of the poll experience. And so we can just very, simply look at the composition of a response sample on a given day relative to what we know the census norms of demographics are. That's the easy part. 2 is most of the kind of the data we collect, the questions we ask are kind of quota sampled. So we're, for every, say, 1,000 people we're trying to ask about a given brand, we're going to get 510 women and 490 men. I'm being obtuse with these numbers, but you get the basic idea. So we can manage for that. So generally where we may have a problem is sort of an overabundance of maybe a given demographic group, but we'll sort of, I don't want to say throw those people away, but we put them in a different bucket. So that's one. Number 2 is we are really thoughtful about where our polls are being derived. So the publishers that we partner with and the platforms that we partner with, if we are looking at the day-to-day flow of the profile of our respondents, and we see that maybe we're starting to get thin, say in a group like Hispanics or wealthier people, we go out and target to do partnerships with publishers that reach that audience to fill those gaps or those buckets. But I would say the real answer, the most important answer in terms of why we have so much confidence in our data, is we've done a tremendous amount of work to compare our findings to known outcomes, where there's empirical data about a given thing. One of the case studies or academic papers you'll find on our website was something we did with a guy by the name of Joel Rubinson, who you may know is a longtime research person. This was years ago. We collaborated with the NPD group, now Circana, where they had, empirical point of sale data, say, about given brands. And we were really calibrating questions that we asked about brand purchase behavior to what NPD knew about brand market share. And so, and the first pass of that wasn't perfect. So we tried to understand why would we have been off a little bit here and there, and really calibrated the way that we build our sample and ask our questions to ensure that it was reflective of ground truth, right? So that's what we try to instill in our clients is that confidence that methodology and all those other things aside, which we do take very seriously, the data only matters if it's representative of some future thing or some ground truth. And so we've done a lot of work to prove that as well.
And of course, what you do is you roll this up into a syndicated database. Are there certain types of questions or issues that the data is particularly well suited to address?
Look, I think no more so necessarily than really most kinds of survey questions, right? We always say we have the worst survey methodology in the world, except for all the other ones. There's always going to be that self-reporting error. People will overstate, say questions like, how likely are you to cancel your Netflix subscription if they raise their prices? People will always overstate things like that. Sure. But now, having done, over 800,000 questions in our system and 6 billion answers like that, we can sort of adjust for that error because we've seen it so many times, and we can look at, say, Netflix cancellation rates and sort of adjust for that sort of reporting error. We tend to, and this is really maybe within the last 5 years an increasing evolution for us, we do tend to ask a lot more questions about sentiment and attitudes and intention, as opposed to questions about past behavior. Frankly, because there's ample data out there about past behavior because of companies like Circana and ComScore and others. So we're not really solving a big industry problem by asking people about what they did yesterday. We tend to ask them how they feel about things, what they're planning to do next, right? Things about maybe their lifestyle that might be a little bit more behavioral, but maybe where there isn't as much empirical data out there. So that's really the kind of the niche that we've carved out for ourselves. Is our tagline is that attitudes change before behaviors do. And so we are constantly, and even partnering with some of those companies that I mentioned, looking for attitudinal kind of sentiment shifts in our data that foretell of future shifts in behavior. So we really try to play in that space as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I share that perspective. As it's one thing to look behind you, it's another thing to look ahead, and perceptions and attitudes, and obviously measuring and trending those to us in our daily work also has been much more effective with a lot of the clients that we work with, which kind of leads me to where I wanted to go next. And it's kind of the big elephant in the room. We all face this in running research companies, and that's kind of convincing clients or potential clients that a particular approach can be trusted. You've obviously created something that you've really embraced as vastly different. And I'm sure we've all met lots of research buyers of every particular stripe. Share with us some of the challenges that you've had in terms of those who've been harder to convince, and how you kind of overcome those objections.
There's kind of two categories of resistance I would say we get. One is a lot of kind of legacy type research people at the client organizations we work with who've embraced panel-based research for a really long time, and not only embraced it but have advocated for it to the leadership of their companies. When we come along and say, we have to be very delicate in how we talk about it. We're not going to come and say, look, everything you've been doing is flawed and all the information you've been putting in front of your leadership is flawed. They don't want to hear that, even if it's true, right? Because that's that they've been trusted with that. So it's more about we can make it better, right? We can allow you to do different things. There are certainly roles for panel-based research and financially compensated research. Things like internal customer panels, for example, where you really want to understand your most loyal customer. There's definitely a role that panel types of surveys can serve in that. And if you do need to do really lengthy kind of qualitative types of research, there's going to need to be some kind of compensation involved in that, right? So we have to kind of delicately manage that. We found a better way to do a lot of the things they used to do a different way. But sometimes that's a hill we have to climb with people. On the sort of decision maker side, so maybe the executive, CMO, or whomever that we talk to a lot, when we bring up this issue of kind of survey panelist bias, they immediately get it. They're like, I knew it. I have always known it. I wondered who these people were who were sitting home and answering who these guinea pigs were. So we connect with them on that level, but it still gets back to, I have a lot of other data. I have this empirical data at my fingertips. I know what people bought yesterday and what they watched yesterday. Why do I need to ask them these? Why do I need survey data, right? Survey data has come in and out of vogue over the last, couple decades. And so depending on, we're more or less educating those people on just the additive benefits of the attitudinal signals that we capture. And we're very careful in that case to say that our data is not better than yours, but our data can make your data better, right? So, and that's really true probably in both of those audiences that I mentioned.
Is there an efficiency argument that works to your advantage too? I kind of would envision, has there been a scenario perhaps where somebody said, let's run parallel surveys, one with the older traditional method and one with your methodology that you've used as proof cases?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we've done more of those bake-offs than I can mention or even recall. Yeah. Part of it is, I would say, efficiency, but that manifests itself in two ways. Maybe this is what you meant, but quite frankly, the fundamental benefit of our business is that it's very profitable because we don't carry the cost of respondent incentive or respondent recruitment. Recruitment, right? So we would estimate maybe the average survey business probably has somewhere from 25 to upwards of 40% of their P&L wrapped up in respondent recruitment or incentive costs. We don't have any of those costs, right? Now that's what really allows us to be a syndicated business, but we also do quite a bit of custom research. So we do have a cost structure that allows us to be, competitive, to put it lightly, right? But I would say the more important benefit is the speed that it affords us, right? And kind of the sort of always onness of our data, right? I'm asking, 5,000 people every single day about Nike, but Nike's not a customer of ours. But the benefit there is I can share that data with Nike's competitors, the hedge funds that trade in their stock, and the retailers that sell their apparel, and I can do that at a very very profitable way. And so being able to constantly track these things every minute of every day, oftentimes a client will come to us with a question that we don't need to ask anything new. We already have it, and that's a major benefit to everybody involved.
So I want to talk about as I say this sarcastically with quotations around it, my two favorite letters, that if we had $10,000 for every seminar or article that talked about how it was going to destroy everything we all knew in the world, we would be able to retire, and that's AI. How's it changing what CivicScience does, and what's the future of AI in terms of your current model and potentially expanded capabilities?
Well, first, would this really even be a podcast if we didn't talk about AI?
It probably really, not. And I
can't have
I don't want to be that guy, but I got to go there.
Yeah. So of course we think about it a lot. Our roots at Carnegie Mellon and our roots as an engineering first company. My co-founder, CTO, was kind of doing AI before they called it AI, right? So it's really kind of integral in the way we think about it. I mean, we often roll our eyes at things that are called AI that are just machine learning, and things that were called machine learning that are just statistics, right? So we're a little bit irreverent about some of it, but there are a few things that there are ways that we employ it. That I mentioned, sort of the first question we ask people in, say, maybe they're reading an article on, Variety or RollingStone.com, and what pulls them into the survey is the first question we ask them. And we know that the more germane that question is to the content they're reading, the more likely they are to come into the survey, right? Now, we presume that first, in quote, engagement question has minimal research value because it's explicitly creating an opt-in bias, right? But it is the candy that we use to lure people into the experience. And so we've used large language models to increasingly optimize that first engagement question and it's had a 3x increase in our engagement rates over the last 18 months, just getting smarter and smarter about matching the question to the context of the article. So there's operational ways like that we use it. We also of course, it's creating all kinds of efficiencies in terms of code writing across the company and even some of the underlying analytics that we do. Mm-hmm. But I would say that where we're thinking about it, bigger picture, is we own this database. We own this data set. And I can say very confidently, and I'll say it publicly here and on the record, we have the largest attitudinal database that's ever been created in the history of mankind, full stop. Over 6 billion collected answers, 165 million respondents, millions new responses every day, the things that we talked about. But we own all of that data, right? As opposed to sort of being a broker in the middle of a survey buyer and a survey taker. We own, right? That it is our data set, and it's built to be really complementary and additive to the larger universe of data that's out there. And so where we see ourselves fitting in the longer term picture of AI is as a very valuable ingredient in AI models, as a tuning element, as an input to analysis that's being done. Now, of course, all the protections and security have to be built to make us feel safe doing that. But we really feel that that's the future we're aiming toward. And as the kind of market starts to settle itself, where you're going to have 4 or 5, maybe fewer big companies that own the models, the differentiators across those models are going to be what data sets they have in their models. And we believe we're really well positioned to play there. So for us, it's all net great, right? The always onness and recency of our data is something of a protective moat, because even if a model could recreate what we asked yesterday, it can't recreate what we're asking tomorrow. So we feel pretty good about where the world is going.
Yeah, and there's obviously the need for currency and fluidity as well, which I often we've often, both having been on the client side and now for the last 16 years on the provider side, it's always that battle that you have to fight. We're almost up against the end of our time here. We could go on for quite a bit, and I don't want to let you go before we talk a little bit about the talent pool, the necessary tools that people need to be successful in the industry. We have a lot of folks that listen to the series that are earlier in their careers, and you've certainly challenged convention, and that means building a team around you that buys into that vision. What are the most important skills or mindsets that you look for in people joining your team? And complementary to that, what advice would you give to somebody who's getting into the insights industry today?
It's a good segue from your last question about AI. Again, a thing I think a lot about. Also, with a daughter about to head into college with an interest in economics and data science. So, kind of coaching her on gaining sustainable skills in this future. Number one is a storytelling capability. She yelled at me, Dad, stop telling me what to do the other day. But I was like, you need to take some communications and public speaking classes alongside the rest, because your ability to take the numbers and all these kinds of things and build narratives around them is really the defensible skill you're going to have. We always say here that the data or insights are ever more impactful the more personally relatable you can make them to people. And that takes a lot of work and creativity and really strong kind of elegant communication skills to be able to do it. And so, because what the business leaders, even less so maybe like the consumer insights folks in these companies, because I would urge them they're the ones that also need to have these skills. What the decision makers are, the C-level folks, they don't want more numbers. They don't want more tools. They want somebody to tell them a story. They want to know what's happening. Why is it happening?
Why is it
so what and now what? And so we can't stop short of just being producing tone deaf numbers for people. We have to be able to contextualize them. And so we really prioritize people, even at the engineering and data science level, right? People that are pretty far in the weeds in the work, that they can understand and contextualize the information we're bringing in and the information then that we're kind of reproducing back to our clients. So that's absolutely number one. And I probably could even think of a close number two.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. It always amazed me, and still to this day, that something that I always took for granted, because I kind of cut my teeth from that perspective. My first ever job out of undergrad was in public relations, and then I got into research. It just amazed me how there was a lack of that skill set with people in our profession. It's good to see that you and others are transforming that, because I think it makes us more bulletproof as a profession going forward.
Well, and I'll add one thing. I just want to added bit of like additional statement I'll make to that is that a lot of companies shy away from that, what I'll call consultative element of the work, because it's seen as being less profitable, right? There's great annual recurring revenue to produce a software as a service platform that people just log into, and maybe you provide a little bit of technical support, but you leave it up to them to do all the interpretation. But the world's moving away from that right now. And so it's more about what we focus on is, given the cost structure we've achieved in the way we collect our data, it allows us to invest some of those resources in that more service-based kind of white glove level, part of our business that I think the clients really need and they really appreciate.
Yeah, and it adds value. I mean, I always felt that without that, you're kind of creating a very easily catchable commodity. I mean, if all you're doing is providing a platform, how are you adding value? You will be replaced. It's great to hear that perspective, and great that that's part of the model you've built. John, wish we could chat further, and I'm sure we will in other contexts, but thank you so much for being a part of Insights and Innovators, and thanks for providing your perspective and the bold choices you've made. This has been one of my favorites that we've done. Thanks for being
part. Very kind of you. Thanks, John. I really appreciated it and enjoyed the time together.
Thanks for joining the Insights and Innovators podcast from Market Research Institute International. Click subscribe to never miss an episode and visit us at mrii.org for more market research insights.